Welcome to Brain Strength, the series where this average jabroni decides to do a couple athletic things every now and then, while also teaching you a little bit about sports psychology and how to use it, whether you're a coach, athlete, or somewhere in between. I'm your host, RJ Lynch, mental performance consultant, and with my master's in sports psychology, let's get this thing going. In this episode of Brain Strength, we're going to be focusing on sports psychology during the injury rehab process. In previous videos, we've talked about how sports psychology can play a role on whether or not you get hurt or not. But now we're going to look at what happens when you are hurt and need to find your way back to being 100% again. So, a little quick caveat before I get into talking about things here. Just like most injury rehab research, whether it's physical or not, it's very hard to really set things in stone because studies are harder to control. So as I talk about some of the things, mention how things should point in one direction or the other, just understand that this is constantly growing because we can't just go around breaking legs of people to see, hey, that person healed faster by doing this or that than this person, so it must be true. It's kind of unethical to do that. No one's really volunteering for their tendons just to be cut up so we can see what heals faster. So fortunately, it's hard to change anything there. With that said, the other thing that goes into it is everybody's different. So even if you have two people, each have a right knee ACL tear because of one person's diet, injury history, genetics, everything else that's going on, there's so many factors that you really can't control enough to get a sense or an idea that this is what influences things the most. Though you are able to get a general ballpark idea. So as we go through, just understand that some things are going to work for other people that might not work for you and vice versa. And lastly, something that's a lot harder to nail down is concussions. Concussions are a lot fuzzier to talk about, and the rehab process is not as set in stone because when you're messing with something that's already messing with your brain, you really don't know what's going to happen. For concussions, there's some people that a meditation works great for them. It helps them calm that mind, helps stop all the static, all the headaches going in. Other people, because it's the brain, decides that meditation is just going to make things worse. So you're constantly playing this game of testing, seeing, hoping that nothing makes the symptoms worse as you work along the way to deal with the other things that come up, such as the anxieties, the depressions, and the so on and so forth from there. So as I get into a little bit about the injury rehab, the last things I'll say is, as I talked about here, I am really more focused on the long-term injuries, though a lot of these concepts can apply to a short 1-week ankle sprain or something like that. I really want you to internalize I'm focusing more my words towards long-term shoulder repairs, knee repairs, broken bones, things like that, where symptoms tend to be worse and more problematic than someone who's just dealing with slight strain, slight sprain that's back in a week or two. Though you can use these same techniques, understand the same things if you are in that boat. Next up, as we go through injury rehab, you have to understand that it is a multidisciplinary approach. To get your best results over the course of many months, you have to work with your PTs, you have to work with your doctors, you have to work with your mental performance consultants, your strength coaches, your sport coaches, all these different pieces to kind of piecemeal together what is a return to play, what is getting you back to what you should be, where you want to be. Now, with that said, my part of that multidisciplinary approach is looking at what are the things that go on in the brain that we can work on. Well, a lot of these tend to be lack of control. As athletes, we like being in control. We like this idea of like, oh, I can control what I eat, my workouts, this. I have power over something. I can influence the outcomes of things because of what I do. But when we become injured, a lot of times it feels like all that control is just ripped away from us. As we go through our rehab, we have to just trust this process where we're so used to more, do, and I can change something. In injury rehab, it's You have to let things be and trust that things are going to work out. The next piece that we work on a lot is self-image, identity. Athletes, people who work out a lot, eventually we get to this point where we start to really strongly identify with our sport, that we become a runner, we become a football player, we become a basketball player, we become a softball player, whatever it is, we become that thing. And then when we get injured, it feels like this piece of us was just lost, that we no longer are or can be that thing again. Now we have to be something else, and we don't know what that something else is. So with mental performance consulting, a lot of times what we do is we start to identify those other things that we are during our injury, or even how to relook at what we are as an athlete. Sometimes it's no longer being the star player. Now it's, can you be a leader by doing things right in rehab, by talking, by speaking with your team? Just have realigning that self-image, that self-identity with whatever you're capable of during your injury. And then finally, the other thing is just the rehab process is what we start to address. We start going after what different things can our brain do that can help our body just heal. Believe it or not, there are some things that, once again, the loose research on injury rehab shows might benefit your injury outcomes, might help you come back to play better than you were. So let's take a look at those things and move on. All right, so we know our big things that get affected, the big things that go on are the lack of control, our identity, and then just this lack of skill, this kind of loss where we're trying to do whatever we can to influence the injury, influence our body during that time. What are the skills that get used? What are the things that get incorporated to help with that process? What would I do as a professional? The first step is usually asking for help and finding social support. Some athletes are very good at this. Some people are very good at this, of just asking for help, of knowing like, hey, I broke my shoulder. I cannot wash my back as easily, wash my hair as easily, whatever it might be. And some people are very good at looking at their friends, their family, and be like, hey, can you help me do this or that? And that goes into that identity piece of someone who's already open, is willing to share, is going to look at like, hey, can you just help me? Someone who's very independent, their whole identity is like, I'm this independent boss, I'm this athlete that doesn't need anybody else. When they get to injury, they're like, crap, how am I going to do this now? So by talking with them, figure out how to trust and work with their friends, their family again, is one way. The next thing that we do is, as mental performance consultants, use a little bit of imagery. There's two types of imagery I really focus on with athletes when they're injured. And it comes down to healing imagery, that we call it, or technique/return injury. So with healing imagery, it's exactly what it sounds like. Say you have a torn muscle. You're laid up for a bit. There's a lot of pain. It kind of burns a little bit. During a healing imagery script, what we might do is you sit down, you relax, then you start to picture, say, that hamstring. It's in shreds, it's like all here. And as you're closing your eyes, just breathing, we picture slowly, one by one, the muscle fibers start to reattach. The heat that you might feel from the burning starts to cool down. And just by doing that a few times, some of the research points to that might help the injury heal better. And if not, it just helps you feel better. It returns a little bit of that control that you feel you've lost, and kind of gives you this idea that maybe I can affect something. So at the very least, mentally, it feels like I'm doing something more than just trusting in the exercises I was given. The second type of imagery that we do is that return to player technique. So with technique imagery, you might be laid up for a long time. So you sit, you start to imagine maybe your certain drills or things that you like to do or need to work on just in your mind. Past research has shown that people who use imagery to see themselves doing bicep curls with heavy weight did see muscle growth there to a similar degree to people actually doing it over certain times. So, in theory, by doing the technique, by working on the things in your mind while you're injured, even though you can't be up and swing your bat at the tee, maybe you're still working on those mental mechanisms that let you do the same motion. You're changing that muscle memory a little bit because you're changing your mind. You're making your body feel a certain way even though it can't do all the things fully. And then with return to play imagery, that last piece, many times when athletes come back from an injury, especially if it happened on a playing field, one of the first things that happens is they become fearful of doing similar moves. They become fearful of doing something that might re-injure them. So what we do is a couple weeks, couple months before you start returning, we put you through mental simulations of doing those motions so that you're no longer scared or feel more confident in your ability to do things without getting hurt again. Next up, we'll do mindfulness. Mindfulness is just that becoming present, calming the body down, just relaxing. Your body and your mind only have so much bandwidth. If you're always tense, if you're always stressed, if all your muscles are tense, it's harder for your body to heal because it's trying to put those resources to the tension and everything there. So by relaxing, you just give your body more time, more ability to focus on what it needs to. Self-talk. Going into a little bit of that self-image, that self-identity, what happens is we start beating ourselves up. We start saying we suck, we're not this, we're no good anymore. So by reframing our mindset, by reframing the way we talk to ourselves, it just helps us stay motivated. It helps us come back and do our rehab exercises. It helps us believe that we are going to make it back from whatever pit we're in right now. Next up, we'll focus on education, whether it's with a mental performance consultant or with one of your ATs, PTs, whatever it is, just learning more about your injury can help you understand, okay, this is my markers, this is what I'm working on, this is where I want to go from where I am. And the next step is goal setting. If we just look at the 9-month recovery as I gotta be here in 9 months, it can feel like a lot, especially when we can't walk at all. To think that we're gonna be able to run, to jump on a leg, it's quite a shock. So if we can break that up into the smaller goals, even some fun ones here and there. I joke at times with people that when you're writing your goal of coming back from injury, come up with something fun. Come up with something like in full control of your scooter, so you're not running into walls anymore. Able to drive around by yourself. Being able to do things like that are just more enjoyable than I have to get my knee to X flexion or my muscle must have this much strength, because it just gets boring. And sometimes you don't hit those as fast. And when you don't hit things as fast, you become less motivated and you start being on yourself. So coming up with fun things that you might be able to do a little bit faster and have less pressure, a lot of times just helps out there. So by using the skills, by attacking the things that set us back during injury rehab, what are the things that we can get out of it? Well, the first, sometimes it's faster recovery. Some drills, some ideas point to the idea that you might come back faster and you might come back stronger than you were when you left by using the mental skills. And when I say faster, I mean timeline faster, not necessarily your speeds are going to be faster. But sometimes you are a little bit quicker on the recovery route because you're using your brain and your body in full and it's not working against itself. And with that, better recovery piece also comes down to sometimes you have better technique. Sometimes the things that we don't get to pay attention to because we're so focused on the physical can get worked on during this time where we're laid up. And now we have a better control of the playbook. We better understand how to read a defense, how to read another offense, anything like that can be improved, and we're just better off than before. From there, you can be more motivated during your recovery. If your only goal is to be back in 9 months at full running, jumping capacity, by month 4, when you're still not able to really do a lot of things you want to do, it can be very demotivating. But if you do proper goal setting with people, whether it's professional AT, PT, or professional mental performance consultant, whatever it is, if you're able to break that into single month goals, it's a lot easier to chase that 1 month at a time and also reevaluate. So if you're chasing things to too high of a degree, trying to come back too fast, and you're not hitting those goals then, you're able to tone them back and kind of look at, okay, what do I need to do instead to get where I need to be? And then finally, you're just psychologically ready to come back. We always focus on the physical return to play, but as I mentioned during the imagery piece, sometimes you're afraid to come back. Sometimes your brain just isn't ready, doesn't trust the body yet. So by working with someone during the whole process, you lessen the chance of that fear. And then also you're not dealing with as much of the depression, the anxiety, the stress that injury can cause along the way. So what are some practical things that you can do either as a coach or as an athlete? Well, the first thing that a lot of times I have athletes do is some writing drills. Big one is writing to your support. Write to the people who are helping you with things and say, hey, thank you for this. Thank you for taking your time. I appreciate it. When you do this, it really makes me feel more motivated. Because then they know, like, hey, I'm doing something. They feel more engaged and are more likely to keep helping you. The other thing I'll have people do is write to your injury. We get very hard on ourselves. We get very broken when we get injured, especially for the long term. So sometimes just sitting down and writing to the injury and say, like, I'm mad at you, I'm angry with this, but I will forgive my body because it's the only one I have. Can just let you get all that anger, all that anxious, that stress out in writing, and then you're just able to move on from it better. The next thing is we work on a little bit of goal setting. I talked about that already to a point, so I'm not going to get into much more here, but have your AT or PT work with you on some goals, create some fun things that you want add in there. Might look like being out of a boot by prom so you can take better pictures. Next up is some mindful rehab drills. So depending on your injury, you can be doing a lot of different things, whether it's working with a roller, working with bands, or even doing different floor drills. After so much time doing things like bird dogs, hip thrusts, all those things that you might be doing, or rolling out certain injuries. Believe it or not, over time, this can get really boring. This can just start to suck when you're doing the same thing for 5 months. So how do we get over this boredom? How do we get over this lack of motivation? Start to use this as your time to recenter yourself. I'm sure if you're a student athlete at this point, you have school, you have relationships, you have other things going on that are causing stress in your world. So take your rehab time as a point to just relax. Make it almost that fun time where you're just like, I don't have to think about anything else. I just gotta be here. Kind of what you usually do during sport. When you're running, when you're jumping, when you're lifting, a lot of times that's time where everybody's able to just turn their brain off and just do. Make rehab that time. Make rolling out that point where you just sit on the roller, take deep breaths, let your mind relax, let the muscles relax along the way, and just use this as that point. Even if you're doing things with rehab, if you've got band drills, maybe you've got something along the lines of this, where the band is tied to something and you're like, oh, this sucks. Focus in on that feeling of that band against your foot and just breathe, relax, feel. Just making this that time where you can turn that brain off and not worry about things anymore. Next up is the mental rehearsal of drills. Mention this with imagery a bit. Sit down, think about the drills that you hate doing, that you suck at. And can you just create an imagery script where it says, I'm doing X, Y, Z in this environment, this is going on, I'm doing this well, I see my body twisting in this exact motion like it should. You just see that and practice it just like you would during a healthy season. And then finally, figure out the playbook. Figure out how to do the mental side of your game. Whether you play football and you're a quarterback or So trying to read the defense, take film and work on reading the defense better. If you are a volleyball player, start studying how other teams move or act. Like, are there certain things that people do when they're going up for a block or when they're going up for a fake? Something along those lines. Can you start figuring out those little details about opponents, about yourself? Is there things that you do that you can watch in your play? If you're a pitcher and there's a certain move or something you make when you are getting ready for one of your pitches, can you figure out what that is that opponents might pick up on so that you can reduce doing it? Just those little things here or there by just doing what you can't do in the season because you're too busy trying to be stronger faster. Can you do it now while you're laid up? So that's all I have for today. I hope that makes sense. And until next time, if there's anything I said that you don't like, that offended you in some way, I hope you can forgive me. And if there's anything in the comments you say that's a bit offensive to me, no, I'm going to forgive you. So until next time, brain strength out.